This is my 1994 EF XR6, which I bought for only $3,000. Now at the time, it was the cheapest running manual EF XR6 on Facebook Marketplace. I lowballed the guy and I managed to get it for a good price. And after fixing the car, making it run, no way! Putting a new transmission in it, I decided to pull it off the road and turbocharge it. And this is where the costs really started adding up. And over the past too long, I've been doing a turbo build on it, basically doing a complete restoration on the car and modifying it in the process. But how much does it really cost to turbocharge your Ford Falcon? And if you guys watching are considering doing an E-Series or an AU turbo build, watch this video because it might give you a shock. But before that, I'm going to give you guys a little bit of history with this car over the past year and a half that I've owned it. So in October of 2022, I bought this thing off Facebook Marketplace for only $3,000. It's a factory EF XR6 Tickford, and it was originally automatic, but the previous owner manual converted it and did a pretty shit job of it. So starting off, this isn't the factory motor that it came with. This is a Series 3 Intake, which I pulled out of my AU Falcon, which I crashed and basically just pulled all the running gear out of it. I bought that AU Falcon for 1,500 bucks. I managed to sell some things off it, so I worked out the motor to be about $200. Then, for all you manual people out there, if you want to turbo your car, you need to buy a clutch. And if you have a T5, you probably need to buy a spare T5 as well. So I installed an extreme heavy-duty button clutch. And as I'm going through the video, I will be putting price lists up so you guys can visualize how much I've actually spent on this turd. Now obviously, if you're turbocharging a car, you need a turbocharger. So Max Pitting Rods was kind enough to send me out their Street Series GT3582. Obviously I had that sent out to me, but if you were to buy it, this is how much it would cost you. Now there are a few different manifold options that you can go with. On an Intake, you can either fabricate your own one, you can use the standard exhaust manifold that came on the car when it was naturally aspirated, and you can do like a J-pipe setup. That is a really cheap way of doing things, and it isn't necessarily going to work the best or even sound the best or flow the best or anything. But if we're strictly talking about budget, that is the most cost-effective way to do it. I didn't want to go down that route because I just didn't want to. Probably a mistake on my end, but it is what it is. Anyway, so this is an SDF side design high mount manifold with a T3 flange and external wastegate port off the actual manifold itself. This is a 5-bolt to V-band 3-inch adapter, which is from Aeroflow, and I had the whole exhaust custom made 3-inch stainless all the way, a cat and a muffler, and my good friend Luca flew him down, paid him to do my exhaust. But if you don't have amazing friends like I do to help you out, it might cost you a little bit more. Now the next thing you want to consider is how you're going to cool the charged air that comes from this spinny boy here to the intake plenum right over there. I'm using an ED plenum. You can use an AU plenum. You can even adapt an FG plenum to it. You can buy so many different things. I think this one here looks the best. I picked it up for only 30 bucks from the wreckers, so you really can't go wrong. It's forward facing. It flows well from what I've heard, cleans up the engine bay heaps as well. But you obviously need an intercooler, and this is a locally made 3-inch cooler, which I picked up from a mate of mine, Turbo Tristan, for only 150 bucks. Once again, you can buy coolers from Max Pitting Rods, they're really cheap. Another thing you need to consider is obviously the intercooler piping. So once again, I was very fortunate enough for Max Pitting Rods to send out all this 2.5-inch piping. So that didn't cost me anything. Massive shout out to Max Pitting Rods. But once again, once you have the piping, you need to fully custom make it unless you want to buy, for instance, a spool and boost turbo kit from TI Performance, but they're really pricey. This was made again by my good friend Luca, flew him down, paid him to do it, so you need to consider that as well. It's already getting quite expensive, and it's just the tip of the iceberg. Just because the car's cheap doesn't mean it's going to be cheap to turbocharge it. So I hope this video will help you guys be a little bit more informed on how expensive these builds can get. It doesn't have to be a $50,000 Sylvia for it to be expensive. Trust me, I've gone through this and I'm not even done yet. Moving on, if you want to push a little bit of power and make it reliable, you need to do a few modifications to the engine. This engine, although not vital, has a few supporting mods. It's got an MLS head gasket. I just bought a Permaseal VRS kit. I put a new timing chain in it as well. It's got ARP head studs. It's got dual row valve springs, and it's got a stage 3 weight cam, I think, from memory. All of those things aren't necessary. You can just drop a standard intake in and run 300 kilowatts all day. Now, you got your hot side, you got your cold side, you got your clutch, but you need a fuel system because a factory 90s or early 2000s Ford fuel system will not keep up with a turbocharged engine, I guess you can say. What I've done is enlisted the help of Raceworks. I'm not sponsored by Raceworks, but I highly recommend their products. They're super amazing quality and they're quite affordable for what they are as well. So you need a few things. If you're doing it really, really cheap, yes, you can get away with the stock fuel pressure regulator, or you can buy a factory BA to FG fuel pressure regulator and do it like that. You don't need an aftermarket fuel rail. You can use the stock one with a adapter for a fuel pressure regulator. I kind of screwed up. I didn't know that you could do that, so I ended up just buying a fuel rail. Silly me. Shouldn't have done that, but you will need a fuel pressure regulator. You will need some adapters to go from the hard lines to AN lines as well, unless once again, you're just keeping the stock stuff. This is just what I've done to future-proof the build a little bit. Once again, I've also got a ED Raceworks fuel rail. Yes, they do make bolt-on fuel rails. Yes, they are very good quality. All these various fittings and hoses and lines and whatnot, they obviously, they do add up. I've spent easily a couple hundred to, up to $500 in all the lines. Excuse the mess back here, but I am currently in the process of installing a upgraded fuel pump with bulkhead fittings on the fuel hanger to run upgraded wiring. If you run an upgraded fuel pump with the stock wiring, you will end up with a fire. It's not an if, it's a when, because the factory wiring is not equipped to handle the new upgraded fuel pumps of today's day and age and how many amps they draw and stuff. Another thing on these intakes, which is optional, but I highly recommend it, is to put a catch can on the engine as well. You don't necessarily need a Raceworks catch can. I just know that they work really well. I have one in my built motor S15 and it works exceptionally well. Another thing you got to factor in is obviously when you turbocharge these engines, they aren't new anymore. They're almost as old, if not older than I am. I'm 23 years old. So you need to consider the fact that a lot of things are going to be worn out in them, maybe valve stem seals, maybe the timing chain, the guides. I know this motor had 270,000 Ks on it. The timing chain guides are all chewed up. All the plastic was chewed up and shit, so I had to replace it. ECUs. TI Performance, Jason, he has these J3 chips, which I'm sure if you're watching this video, you're familiar with these chips. If you don't have the money to spend on, for instance, a Barrett ECU or a Haltech like I'm using, I bought the Haltech and stuff used, so that's how I'm saving a little bit of money there. The J3 chip is very rudimentary, although it will work if you're running a very basic setup on 98. In my opinion, I would go for simplicity reasons. Haltech, you can always take it out, sell it, put it in another car. They're very modular. There are people that do make patch harnesses, such as Bill Hooton. He's an amazing guy, knows his stuff really well, and he is sort of well known in the Ford community for making patch harnesses both for Barrett ECUs and Haltechs. I'm not going that route because I'm not made the money. My mate Ollie, he used to have an ED, a turbo ED before it got stolen unfortunately. But he actually wired up the Haltech 750 all by himself. I'm gonna be paying Ollie to wire up the ECU in my car. And in the process, we're also tucking a lot of the wiring in the factory fuse boxes under the guards here, just on that side. I hope this video helped you guys in some way or another. This is just what I've done on my car. There are a few things I would have done differently, a few things I would have done that were a bit less complicated than what I've done, hence why this thing has taken so long to build. If there's anything I missed in this video, please leave your suggestions and questions in the comments below and I'll do my best to try and answer them. And if you guys enjoy this video, please consider subscribing and following on with this build because it's only going to get better. Once again, thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Take it easy.